Amityville, Long Island, New York, 1975. Ed and Lorraine Warren, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, are sitting in the infamous Amityville house with the Lutz family. Ronald DeFeo, Jr. killed his family with a shotgun a year before, and the Lutz family claims to have witnessed paranormal activity. Lorraine has a vision of herself in Ronald's place on the night of the murders during the Warren seance. She sees herself performing the acts, first with Ronald's parents, then with his 3 brothers. Lorraine then meets a demonic creature dressed as a nun, followed by the death of a man. Lorraine screams, and Ed pulls her from the vision to console her. 3 years later in Enfield, England. Janet Hodgson, Madison Wolfe, and her companion Camilla, Emily Tasker, are sitting outside the school, smoking cigarettes. She hands it to Janet just as a teacher walks outside to chastise the ladies for smoking. She confiscates the cigarette and puffs on it. Janet shares a home with her elder sister Margaret, Lauren Esposito, younger brothers Johnny, Patrick Macaulay, and Billy, Benjamin Hay, as well as their mother Peggy, Frances O'Connor. The Hodgsons are suffering financially. Their father abandoned them for a neighbor woman, and Billy suffers from a speech impediment that causes him to be bullied at school. Peggy struggles with self-doubt as a lone parent. Janet and Margaret are sleeping in their chamber at night when Janet becomes aware of a disturbing presence. She appears to be speaking to herself at first, but then she responds with a growling, raspy voice that declares, "This is my house." Margaret believes Janet is joking until she stands by Margaret's bed and an older man, behind Margaret, repeats the remark. Margaret switches on the light and discovers no one behind her. She makes the decision to slumber with the light on. Back in America, the Warrens are appearing on a talk program to discuss the Amityville case. The show's other speaker dismisses the case as a hoax before criticizing Lorraine's alleged clairvoyance. This enrages Ed, causing him to argue with the other guy. Lorraine consoles him backstage. Janet and Billy spin records to the melody of "There Was a Crooked Man." Janet ties her limb to the bed as the children go to bed. She ends up on the living room floor, with no clue how she got there. When Billy is walking around the home, he notices a toy fire truck on the floor. He rolls it into a tent in the hallway, but it soon rolls into Billy's chamber. He returns outside and wheels it into the tent, causing a resounding groan. While Margaret sounds a pounding at her door, Billy dashes to his mother's room. She unlocks it and sees no one outside until Janet appears and denies pounding on the door. Janet is viewing TV the next day when the channels begin to change on their own. The control has also gone missing. Janet proceeds in search of it and discovers it on the chair behind her. "My house," screams a spectral figure from the corner. Janet screams and runs back to the sofa. Janet wakes up on the floor of her apartment as if she's been thrown. Margaret is informed that there is someone in the home. Their beds begin to shake before Margaret can disregard it. They yell and dash to Peggy's chamber. She enters the girls' room and believes they're teasing her until the girls' dresser is pushed up against their door. The Hodgsons walk across the street to their next-door neighbors, the Nottinghams. Peggy requests that the police examine her home. The police discover nothing, but they are startled when they notice a chair sliding across the room on its own. Ed is painting a portrait of something he claims to have seen in a dream at the Warren home. Lorraine saw the same demonic nun in her apparition. A noise is heard in the passageway later, while she is sitting in the living room with their daughter Judy, Sterling Gerrans. Judy walks outside to investigate. Lorraine discovers herself gazing in terror at the demon nun. Lorraine walks into the workplace after it. She believes she spots a nun in the darkness, but it's just a painting. However, the demon remains in the chamber and approaches the painting, causing it to come to life. It growls as it runs towards Lorraine, causing her to see the same vision as before, except this time the man who dies is Ed, who merely says, "I'm sorry, Lorraine," before being impaled by a large wooden spike. Lorraine begins yelling and scribbling in her Bible until Judy pulls her out of it. Enfield residents become conscious of the Hodgson's haunting. Several paranormal researchers, including Maurice Grosse, Simon McBurney, and Anita Gregory, Franca Potenti, become involved, with the latter claiming a lack of evidence to indicate the phenomenon is genuinely paranormal. Maurice and a news team arrive at the Hodgson residence to conduct interviews with Janet and Margaret. Janet appears uneasy during the interview, and she starts to speak in the raspy old man's voice. The entity introduces itself as Bill Wilkins, 72, and demands that everyone vacate his house. The children in the Nottingham house sleep in the living room. While everyone else is sleeping, Billy wanders through the house and comes across a creature in the shape of the Crooked Man, reciting the nursery rhyme monstrously and chasing Billy. Janet appears with the creepy voice saying the rhyme as he runs to inform his mother and the others. She then lets out a terrifying scream, shattering the glass in the room. She collapses and begins to foam at the lips. A priest visits Ed and Lorraine Warren's house and plays an audio recording of the interview for them to listen to. The cleric requests their assistance in this matter. Lorraine is hesitant as she describes the vision she had of his demise to Ed. He interprets it as a sign that she is intended to prevent it. They plan to visit England. When the Warrens arrive in Enfield, they run into the Hodgsons. Peggy shows Ed her trashed bedroom, where the walls are decorated in crosses. They then use a chain to secure the area. Lorraine runs into Janet on the swing set outside her home. Janet laments the fact that people are avoiding her due to the rumored apparition. Lorraine consoles her by saying that perhaps one individual, like Ed, can help change things. Janet claims the voice she hears wishes to harm Lorraine. The Warrens, Maurice, and other crew members congregate in the Hodgson living room to attempt to communicate with the spirit. When the adults turn their backs on Janet, she sits in the chair and begins speaking in the accent of Bill Wilkins. Ed removes his cross necklace from his pocket and places it in front of Janet's face, making Bill sound disturbed. Before everything appears to settle down, he yells something incomprehensible. The Warrens present their findings to the other investigators. Anita is the most skeptical, believing Janet is playing a game. Ed looks to be doubting himself as well. The Warrens spend the night with the Hodgsons. Janet discovers herself in the bedroom, surrounded by crosses. Before Janet is attacked by Bill's ghost, everything begins to flip upside down. Her screams alert the adults, who hurry to open the door and free Janet. Peggy brings Ed downstairs to the basement on another occasion to inspect her water issue, which has caused the basement to flood. Peggy believes she sees someone behind Ed, but Bill's ghost appears in the water and grabs her. Ed assists her in breaking free. As the Warrens remain, the children develop feelings for them. Ed gets an Elvis record for the kids to listen to after Peggy notices that her ex-husband took the music from the house. Unfortunately, the record player had broken down. Ed, undeterred, picks up a guitar and begins to perform "Can't Help Falling in Love with You." He also persuades the students not to let bullies bring them down. Lorraine has a confidential conversation with Maurice. He claims they are about to become historical figures. Lorraine is unsure about his remark, but he adds that he lost his daughter years ago and had hoped to communicate with her in some manner if it were possible. The kids hear noises emanating from the kitchen on another night. Johnny resolves to investigate in order to confront this bully. Margaret yells as Janet vanishes. She appears in the kitchen, armed with a knife and the door handle. As things are thrown around, the adults attempt to get into the kitchen. They discover shattered chairs and dishware throughout the kitchen, but Johnny and Janet are nowhere to be found. They finally find Johnny, and Janet is trapped inside an electrical box, speaking another incomprehensible message, before being rescued. Anita shows the Warrens video proof of Janet herself throwing objects in the kitchen to create the appearance of a haunting, making it clear that she was faking. Peggy orders everyone to leave the home. Later, when the kids suspect Janet is faking, she tells them that it would harm her family if she didn't do what was expected of her. Lorraine continues to express her skepticism about how Janet appeared to be faking when a camera was aimed at her as the Warrens board the train to return home. Ed then plays the audio recordings of Bill, which he realizes are linked. When the words are combined, they say, "Help me. It will not let me go." Lorraine is then drawn into yet another image. She notices the actual Bill Wilkins, Bob Adrian, who is no longer threatening her. Before the demon nun appears behind Bill and takes him away, he talks in a riddle to Lorraine. Lorraine realizes that Bill is just a pawn, and that the actual threat is this demon. They hurry back to the Hodgson house while deciphering the riddle. Ed deduces that Bill meant they needed to discover the demon's name in order to control it. When the Warrens return, they discover the family locked outside in the pouring rain. Ed attempts to enter through the back door. Lorraine recognizes the sharpened stem left by lightning striking the tree in front of the house as the object that kills Ed in her vision. She attempts to figure out the name of the demon before realizing she already knows it. She peers into her Bible and notices that the demon's name is Valak from her scribbling. She dashes into the home to find Ed. When a pipe bursts and sprays steam in Ed's face, he becomes partly blind. He stumbles and is attacked by the crooked man before reaching Janet's chamber. She stands by the window as it shatters, allowing her to leap onto the plant. Ed rushes to grasp her, barely catching her as he clutches the ripping curtains. Lorraine enters the room and attempts to save Ed, but Valak appears and holds her back. Lorraine calls out the demon's name and sends it back to hell. Lorraine dashes to save Ed and Janet just in time. Janet is perfectly all right. Everything has settled down in the morning. Peggy and Janet express their gratitude to the Warrens for their assistance. A brief text follows, stating that the Enfield haunting became one of history's most notorious instances. Peggy Hodgson remained in the home for 40 years, dying in the same chair as Bill Wilkins. The Warrens have returned home. Ed donates the Crooked Man turntable to his exhibit. Right across from Annabelle, no less. Then he hears music playing upstairs. Lorraine turned on the song, "Can't Help Falling in Love with You." They then perform a performance together.